Hi there, my name is Jane Ganapati and I'm from MuleSoft product management team. In this video, we will look at some of the new features within Anypoint Partner Manager, including the support for CSV and delimited file formats, transaction replay, and Runtime Fabric deployments to deploy B2B integration workloads into Kubernetes clusters. Starting off with a quick context of the demonstration, we have a fictional manufacturing company called Mythical Supplier that uses SAP as their ERP and Slack as their engagement channels internally. And they have a well-defined API architecture where they have a process API that orchestrates the creation of sales orders in SAP and sends messages to the sales teams through Slack. Mythical Supplier does business with a broader set of customers across the globe. So they have to support a variety of EDI and non-EDI message formats, including X12, Edifact, XML, JSON, and CSV files. And we'll see how they are able to use Anypoint Partner Manager to receive messages from their customers, perform validations, acknowledgements, transformation, and routing to send the order information to the downstream processes to orchestrate the order to cash automation. We will more specifically focus on three broader categories in this demonstration, starting off with how they're able to use Runtime Fabric deployment options to deploy their B2B integration workloads on AWS Elastic Kubernetes Service clusters. We will also look at how they are able to do business with XYZ suppliers that sends order information in CSV file format. And we'll also see how they are able to replay transactions that require reprocessing in the event of any system failure or otherwise. We'll also get a glimpse of how they're able to engage with external B2B customers by surfacing their EDI and non-EDI API specifications through a public portal using Anypoint API Experience Hub. We'll first look at how Mythical has configured their Runtime Fabric cluster to deploy B2B integrations into their AWS Elastic Kubernetes service. We are in Mythical Supplier's Runtime Manager in the Anypoint platform. And from the Runtime Fabric's page, we are able to see that they have an active cluster named RTF Prod 202 running in their environment, which is actually, as we can see here, it's hosted on Amazon's AWS Elastic Kubernetes Service. And this particular cluster has been associated with the environment UAT RTF, where we are deploying these B2B integration processes. So since this cluster is available, we are now going to look at how we can configure the deployment target from access management. So from the business groups page within access management, you navigate to the Mythical 3 business group and navigate to the Partner Manager tab where you get to configure your new environment. In this business group, there are 4 environments. 3 of them have been configured to deploy to CloudHub, and this UAT RTF environment has been configured to deploy to Runtime Fabric. So the experience of configuring your deployment target is pretty simplified. So from the environment page, you select between CloudHub 1 or Runtime Fabric. So here we have selected Runtime Fabric, and we get to see all the clusters that are available for this environment that we are configuring the setup. So as we have seen in the previous page, the RTF Prod 202 cluster is something that is already active on this environment, and that has been selected as the target RTF cluster. You also get to configure your runtime version, and Partner Manager uses Anypoint MQ to pass some identifiers for transaction replay, and you get to choose which Anypoint MQ region you want to use. And from the Applications tab, you can configure the prefix with which you want the apps to be deployed. If you want to apply ingress controls and other routing rules based on those prefixes, you have the ability to do that. And Partner Manager requires customers deploying their runtime applications to RTF clusters to provide the connection information for a self-hosted ActiveMQ JMS broker, and you'll be configuring the connection information right here. So when all of these is set up, your environment is now ready for using Partner Manager. And now we are going to the Anypoint Partner Manager, where you get to see that this environment has been configured to deploy to Runtime Fabric. So next thing that we'll be seeing now is how we can configure CSV message types in this environment. Configuring a CSV or XML or X12 or Edifact message types is all very consistent. So you'll be selecting the usage as received from partners because we are expecting a CSV based purchase order coming from XYZ Supplies, one of the customers that we are onboarding. You will select CSV, set your separator characters. If you want to change from comma to pipe or vice versa, you can make those configuration selections following simplified experience in this form. And you'll be naming the message type with a meaningful name. And you'll be importing a reference mapping to help with the routing of the CSV messages. In this environment, we already have a CSV message type that is configured and deployed. So if you look at this message type, it has been named as inbound source purchase order CSV with a reference mapping that is set to extract some additional attributes such as the purchase order number from the CSV payload that will be coming from the customers using this message type. Let's now look at how customers can leverage Anypoint Platform's broader universal API management features to augment the way they engage with their B2B partners to exchange business transactions. As we have seen in the context of this use case, Mythical Supplier receives orders in different message standards and formats from customers across different geographies, which includes receiving Edifact, CSV, X12, XML, and JSON type of messages. You can consider these message types as your object in an API design. So now let's go to Anypoint Platform's Design Center, where Mythical has designed an API for their B2B orders. This is a standard RAML-based API specification design where there are different types of messages that have been defined, including the purchase order XMLs, JSONs, and CSVs in there as the supported message types. And there are different resources that have been configured, including the inbound purchase order XMLs, the purchase order JSONs, CSV, and also you can define to receive an EDI X12 message using this content type, also through the same API endpoint and also Edifact. So this API design has been published to their Anypoint Exchange instance, from where you can document your API specifications with more information. And here we are in Anypoint Exchange, where we are going to look at how this API has been documented with more useful information. And you can also navigate to different operations of that API right here in the screen with a lot of examples published, just like how a potential consumer of this API would interact and interface with this API. And when the API is fully documented and available in Exchange, the next step would be to add that API and create an instance for that API in API Manager. So in this environment, we already have an instance of this API created and set up. So from API Manager, you can create SLA tiers if you want to restrict the number of calls that you get from different segments of your customers to based on their relationship that you have with them. You can define those things, and you can also apply different policies to protect your API instance. So there is just a lot of features that you can take advantage of for protecting your B2B order API endpoint. So once the API is actually the instance is created in API Manager, you actually do have an API instance ID that you would be using in Partner Manager on a HTTP receive endpoint to deploy your actual runtime application instance that will act as the API listener for your interface. So we now have this API instance ID. And if we go back to Partner Manager, so you would basically be configuring that as a receive from partners endpoint and select HTTPS as the protocol. So you can give it a meaningful name. And then you would be basically selecting the option to manage that API with API Manager and be putting that instance ID to create that connection. So when you deploy your first message flow from Partner Manager, it deploys a HTTP inbound application and registers that against that API instance in API Manager. So in this environment, we already have that an API HTTP endpoint created and deployed. So it's registered against this API instance ID that we have in API Manager. And as you can see here, this is actually running on this application since there is an active message flow deployed using this endpoint configuration. There's this application ending with 065. And if you go back to your runtime manager and applications, there are a bunch of applications with that UAT prefix that we saw in the configuration that are deployed automatically by Partner Manager when you have active message flows deployed against those configurations. So we have this inbound X065 endpoint that is running, which is actually registered against this API instance, and hence we see that status of that API is showing as active. And the next logical step here is to navigate to API Experience Hub, where you can browse through all the APIs that are available in your exchange and add them to the public portal. So in this example, we already have the B2B order API added to the public portal. So the consumers or the users of this portal can actually browse through the catalog of APIs and look at the specifications of your message types and the resources in a very easy way. And here is the publicly accessible instance of that API portal, where we can see that there is the B2B order API that is available for potential customers and consumers to view. And they can go through that documentation that we saw in Anypoint Exchange. And they can also go through the API specification to understand the different types of message formats that are supported. So we'll look at the CSV that we are going to be sending shortly into that environment as part of our demonstration. So you can go through that, and you can see that the API is expecting a client ID and secret. You can interface with this API's mocking service, and it is already set with the appropriate content type. And you also get to see an example of the data that this API accepts, and you can send it connecting with the mocking service. And you can also, on the same lines, you can navigate to the different options that are available. So if you want to explore the X12 850 option, so you already have some of these examples and the content type. So you know exactly how this API endpoint behaves in real term. So consumers can kind of start kind of building their processes to interact with that API instance. So we'll now log in as XYZ Supplies, who is one of Mythical's customers, to kind of look at the kind of experience that they have. So now I'm logging in as XYZ Supplies, and they can go through the APIs that are available. They can browse through the different APIs. They can go into the order API that we are looking at, and they can browse through the specifications, and they can also request access. They can create, select the instance that they want to work with, create a client application, and also select a tier in which they want to kind of sign up to get access to this API for. So they already have a client application created and approved. So they have a couple of client applications. So they have the credentials that they can look at to actually work with that API. And we will now quickly look at how XYZ Supplies as a partner has been configured in Partner Manager, and how their inbound purchase orders and outbound purchase order acknowledgement message flows for CSV are configured in the environment. So we are in the partners page in Anypoint Partner Manager, and we are going into XYZ Supplies. And you can also look at their contacts and put their logos, so you have all the information about the customer handy when there is a need to contact them. And since they're not using any X12 or Edifact, they're just an CSV based exchange. So they just have one reference identifier that uniquely identifies XYZ Supplies. And in the message flows page, you have an inbound purchase order CSV and an outbound purchase order acknowledgement CSV flow for this customer. We're going into the inbound CSV flow. So the experience of creating a message flow, whether it's you're creating a message flow for CSV or X12, Edifact, or JSON or XML, it is very consistent. So you are basically presented with a wizard where you make 4 choices. The first one being, how do you expect the data to come in? So this is nothing but the HTTP receive endpoint that is running on this API, which is exactly the API that instance that has been exposed through the portal for XYZ suppliers and other customers to interact with this API. The next step is to select the message type. So this could be an XML, artifact. So here in this example, we have selected the inbound source purchase order CSV as the source message type that is going to be coming from the customer. So when they post the message to that endpoint, they have to basically post it to the base URL of that endpoint, followed by the message type as the relative path. So now as the message comes in, we are translating that CSV into a JSON. So this is a standard data view mapping to convert the CSV file into a JSON message structure that we build graphically using Anypoint Studio. And the next step is to kind of tell Partner Manager what do I do with the translated JSON message. So it needs to be sent to this process API that in turn sends down to the SAP system API and the Slack system API to create the order and send a notification. So this is another API that is running on the Anypoint platform that receives the translated JSON message, orchestrates the creation of the sales order in SAP. So now this message flow is already deployed, and we have these runtime applications ready to process transactions coming from customers in real time. All right, so now we are acting as the customer XYZ Supplies, who is actually posting this inbound source purchase order CSV message with the message specification that has been published and made available through the API portal with the appropriate content type and the client ID and secret. So let's send this message out. So now we just got the 202 accepted response. And if you look at the HTTP response code, you would have gotten a unique Partner Manager transmission ID that is coming back from that HTTP endpoint. If we go to the Slack and we have a message that came just about now with this PO number, and it already has created a sales order in SAP. And we are now in SAP where we are searching for that order number. We see that order with that same PO number that we saw that was sent from Postman, and 4 different items of different quantities. It's all the data and the order getting created in SAP. And now we are back in Partner Manager, where if you go to the activity page, you get to see the 2 transactions. One is the order and the other is the order acknowledgement. So you can navigate to the CSV purchase order message in the environment where you get to see the order number at the top. Click the source payload to view the CSV file and click the target file to look at the translated JSON message after it went through the data view transformation and sent to the process API. You can also copy this transmission ID and search for this transmission end-to-end using Anypoint monitoring. So just going to put that transmission ID in the log search in monitoring. And you see that the message was originally received by this inbound HTTP endpoint application that is actually managed with API Manager. And you can actually trace the transaction from start to finish, including the call going to the order process API and the call to the SAP system API to create the sales order, and then eventually the sales order getting created in SAP successfully. And let's now send a couple more transactions. So it's going to automatically create a new PO number every time a transaction is sent. With the way this Postman is set up, in real world, the orders will be coming from the procurement systems of XYZ with unique order numbers every single time. And now in Slack, we are getting kind of messages pretty much instantaneously as these orders are getting processed and created in SAP. Let's say, for example, let's pick this order number. We can take advantage of the custom message attribute feature that is available in Partner Manager, where you can configure which fields in the transaction payloads that you want to extract. So now we're going to be searching for the PO number with this value, and it's going to bring up all the associated transactions, including the orders and the order acknowledgement, shipment, invoices, or anything for that matter in a single search. So that covers the CSV message processing capabilities. All right, so next we're going to look at the transaction replay capabilities and see how Mythical is able to manage the operational aspects of B2B transaction processing. So we see here, there have been 5 transactions that with orders coming from different customers coming in and failing. So let's look at what happened to these transactions. So we're going to an XML purchase order that came from Raintree with a particular purchase order number. And we see that the message was failed to deliver to the process API. And let's look at the other failures that have happened at the same time. Let's look at this 850 the 850 that came from Orange Tree, which is another customer. And it basically pretty much failed with the same issue in the data processing. So what we're going to do is, um, so the process API that was supposed to receive the translated payloads was not responding, and hence these transactions failed after a few retries. And we are now seeing that this API, which was earlier down, has been started back up since the original failure as the underlying problem was solved. So the operational users at Mythical can now go to the transmission activity page and filter the transactions by failed status. And there are 5 transactions that have failed, and they can either reprocess them or replay them one by one using this experience here, or they can select all the transactions that they want to reprocess and click replay. And they have the opportunity to confirm that they truly want those transformations to be replayed. And I go ahead and click confirm. Now that I know the process API is now up and running, so these transactions should get reprocessed successfully. All right, now we are back in the message level view, and we were looking at 5 of these transactions, 5 of these messages that came from these partners have been replayed successfully. And you can see that this is actually a result of a replay action. And you will also see the transmissions that have been replayed at least once, having this flag that indicates that these messages were replayed by somebody at some point in time for a valid reason. We're going to go into one of these purchase orders. So we'll pick the 850 EDI purchase order that came from this customer Orange Tree. We can now see the purchase order number and everything. So now we have the full end-to-end translation and delivery of the message successfully happening now that the process API is back online and running. So here is our EDI data that came in, and here is the translated JSON message that was sent to the process API, and eventually this would have created an order in SAP. We go to the Slack, we see the order notifications coming for the messages from these customers that originally failed in Partner Manager are now successfully processed and creating orders in SAP. And back in Partner Manager, we are in the replayed instance of that message. And from here, you can navigate to the original transmission that initially failed. And in the original transmission detail page, you actually get to see that the message was originally received at so and so time, and it failed at 12:30 because we were not able to reach the process API. And at 12:39, there is someone that has replayed that message. And from here, you can also navigate back to that replayed instance of that message, which was successful. And you can also go into the message level view for individual transactions like orders or invoices contained within the transmission, and look at the history and the pre and post translated data for those individual messages as well. And one another thing that your platform administrators can do is, from the access management page, they can navigate to the audit logs, select Partner Manager as the product, and select a replay as the action, and apply the changes, and they get to see all the transmission replay actions by each user. So if there is a situation that requires some additional research to understand who replayed and which message, this would be a nice place to look at those user actions from an administrative standpoint. Now that these order messages have been successfully processed into SAP, we're now seeing the outbound purchase order acknowledgements and the shipment and invoice messages flowing back successfully to those partners set up to receive those transactions. And that brings us to the end of this short demonstration of some of the new features available in Anypoint Partner Manager. Thank you so much for watching.